Hi, everyone. This is Scarlett Johnson with Moms for Liberty Unplugged. This has been a very hard week for all of us in this movement. The tragic loss of Charlie Kirk has shaken us all, moms, dads, students across the country. Charlie reminded us that America needs a thriving marketplace of ideas where free speech, freedom of thought, and inquiry are protected. That's the legacy we're here to carry forward. Joining me today are Luke Berg and Cory Brewer from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. They have been on the front lines defending parents, defending free speech, defending our kids, defending our girls, Title IX, defending the Constitution, both in Wisconsin and nationally. So thank you guys for joining me today. It's always great when I can talk to lawyers.
Thanks so much for having us on.
Thanks. We're going to dive right into it. Some news that broke yesterday. The Department of Education released a press release stating Secretary McMahon had said that in Virginia, Loudoun County was found in violation of Title IX and violating federal policy by continuing to allow boys into girls' private spaces, traditionally sex-separated spaces. This is an issue that we have had in Wisconsin, just like in many other states where there were biological boys allowed in girls' spaces and biological girls that were claiming to transition to the opposite sex were allowed in boys' spaces. There was one particular case that was of big interest to us at Moms for Liberty Wisconsin and had, national repercussions. And Luke, that's a case that you had, and I just wanted to know any updates about what had happened.
Yeah, so there's a long history with this issue. So, Title IX was adopted in the 1970s. It generally prohibits sex discrimination in educational institutions. But Congress gave, department the authority to adopt implementing regulations. And from the very beginning, the first implementing regulations carved out an exception specifically for bathrooms, that it doesn't constitute sex discrimination under Title IX to have sex-separated bathrooms, locker rooms, and facilities. So that's been the world we've operated under. That's been, it's just the norm in facilities across the country for decades. But then in 2017, in the Seventh Circuit, a transgender student in the Kenosha area school district brought a case challenging the district's policy of limiting bathrooms based on sex. The student wanted access to the opposite sex bathrooms based on gender identity rather than sex. And the case went up to the Seventh Circuit in kind of a preliminary posture. But the court ruled in favor of the transgender student and said Title IX and the federal Constitution require this school to allow the student to use whatever facility they identify with. Now, I think that was a very wrong decision, wrong on the text of Title IX, wrong on the Constitution, but it is what it is. So that decision came out in 2017. Since then, lots of schools in the Seventh Circuit have tried to distinguish that case either on the facts or arguments that weren't raised in that case. So, one of the things that the Seventh Circuit said in that case is, in that particular school, I'm not sure if this is true or not, according to the Seventh Circuit, the student had to walk a long way to use sort of a gender-neutral alternative bathroom. So some school districts have said, well, if we have more options for students who feel uncomfortable using the bathroom associated with their biological sex, the case should be different. Every one of those cases so far has lost in the Seventh Circuit. So since 2017, sort of the rule has been schools have to allow transgender students to use whatever facilities they identify with. But again, school districts are continuing to fight that and have repeatedly called and asked for the Seventh Circuit to overrule that prior decision. One of those cases got back to the Seventh Circuit, a case called Martinsville, And in a 2-1 decision, the court said, no, we're not going to overrule Whitaker. The one was Judge Easterbrook, and he said, I think Whitaker was wrongly decided, but this is an issue that the Supreme Court's going to have to resolve. And part of his motivation for that was there is now a split in the country. So our federal court system is divided into circuits. The issue has gone up to the federal courts of appeals in the Fourth Circuit, which has agreed with the Seventh Circuit that Title IX requires schools to allow transgender students to use whatever bathroom they associate with. But the 11th Circuit notably disagrees, came to the opposite conclusion. And in that case, the 11th Circuit actually went en banc, which means all of the judges heard it, not just a panel of 3. A 9th Circuit decision recently disagreed, and there's been multiple district courts that have disagreed. So the 4th and 7th Circuit's view is increasingly an outlier around the country. And, for the reasons I said at the beginning, that the text of the regs is just so straightforward and clear. It's sort of hard to see how you write more clearly that you can have sex-separated bathrooms. So in our view, it was so clearly wrongly decided that, again, schools continue to ask the Seventh Circuit to overturn that decision, but so far it hasn't. Now, sort of most recent update, there is a case pending against the Elkhorn Area School District by a transgender student. There's a case pending against the Mukwonago School District, both in Wisconsin. The Mukwonago case was up on appeal to the Seventh Circuit. Again, the school district asked the court to overrule Whitaker. And initially, the panel said, no, we're not going to overrule Whitaker, but said in the opinion, all 3 of us on the panel agree it was wrongly decided. But then shortly after it issued that decision, the Scarlett case came out this summer from the U.S. Supreme Court, which arguably changes the constitutional analysis. So the court said, we're going to vacate our opinion and we're going to ask the parties to brief whether we should overrule Whitaker. And so that was happening over the summer. And I think realizing that they were likely to lose, the plaintiff then moved in the trial court to get rid of the injunction and to vacate the appeal. And the Seventh Circuit ended up mooting the appeal. So
what does that mean?
So the appeal in the Mukwonago case is gone for now. It's back at the trial court, so the case is ongoing. The injunction no longer applies, so the school district no longer has to allow this student to use the opposite sex bathroom, but the student hasn't dropped the case, so it's still ongoing. But there's another case pending at the Seventh Circuit. It's the Martinsville case again. This is the one out of Indiana, where the school district is again asking the Seventh Circuit to overrule Whitaker and the prior iteration of the Martinsville case. So there's a decent chance that the court will do that, but there could also be some movement from the Supreme Court in the meantime. So I think you mentioned at the beginning the West Virginia versus BPJ case. This is a case currently before the United States Supreme Court. The question is a challenge to a West Virginia law that requires sports teams to be separated by sex. That was challenged on equal protection grounds and as a violation of Title IX. The Fourth Circuit said, yes, this violates both. And its reasoning is basically the same as the bathroom issue. And so that case has gone up to the United States Supreme Court, which is going to weigh in on the sports issue. And that may have direct implications for the bathroom issue. It will depend on what exactly the court says, but there's a very good chance that this will resolve the bathroom issue. And we, in fact, just will be filing tomorrow an amicus brief urging the court to clarify in its opinion that its analysis does, in fact, overrule these lower court cases that have held that you can't have sex-separated bathrooms, but must allow transgender students to use whatever bathroom they want. So we'll see what happens with the case, but we're hopeful that Whitaker will go away in the near future.
So what I know for sure is that there are 2 cases headed towards the Supreme Court, West Virginia versus PBJ and Hecox versus Little. And this is about sex separated sports and whether or not that violates Title IX, the Equal Protection Clause, the 14th Amendment. So the Supreme Court has granted cert, so they will hear those arguments on sex separated sports. Is there any indication that they could take a separate case specifically about sex separated bathrooms and locker rooms? Do you think it's necessary? Would a ruling that I would consider favorable, which is that allowing boys or someone from the opposite sex into sex separated spaces does violate equal protection of the girls, so would that suffice? Would that be enough? Or would there need to be a whole nother case that they would have to hear specifically about bathrooms and locker rooms?
Yeah, so it depends. I mean, I think the decision in the West Virginia case is likely to resolve the bathroom issue, but it depends on exactly how the Supreme Court writes its decision. So in the West Virginia case, the Fourth Circuit's reasoning was that discrimination based on gender identity is inherently sex discrimination, always violates Title IX. And to comply with Title IX, schools have to treat transgender students based on their gender identity rather than their sex for anything that is sex separated. So its decision directly pertained to sports, but obviously you can see how that logic applies equally to bathrooms. And in fact, the main case that the Fourth Circuit relied on was its previous decision on the bathroom question. So if the Supreme Court rejects that line of reasoning, which I think it's very likely to for reasons I can go into in a moment, it basically undermines the entire foundation of that prior case from the Fourth Circuit, and that's also the entire foundation of the Seventh Circuit's prior rulings in Whitaker and Martinsville. So I think there's a very good likelihood that once we see the opinion come out, everybody will understand that Whitaker and Grimm are no longer good law, and it's even possible, and this is what we urge the court to do, to name those cases specifically to clarify for everybody so that the whole nation isn't left wondering whether those cases are still good law. Because if the court does leave that question open, then they're going to have to take another case in the very near future because there is an ongoing split in the country about this. There are lots of cases pending. There's one currently pending in South Carolina. There was a recent stay application submitted to the Supreme Court on that. And then there's also the Martinsville case out of Indiana currently before the Seventh Circuit. So one of those cases is going to get back to the court very soon. And so we may just be having this whole argument again next term. If the court if the court rejects the entire premise of the Fourth Circuit again, I just think it should resolve the bathroom issue, but it depends. Just to make the point about why I'm optimistic here. As you know, and have probably talked about, the Biden administration recently adopted a new Title IX rule that, in our view, basically rewrote Title IX on the same premise as the Seventh and Fourth Circuit cases, the idea being that any discrimination based on gender identity is inherently sex discrimination. And the rule explicitly addressed the bathroom issue and required schools to allow transgender students to use whatever bathroom they associate with. That case, as you know, is challenged around the country in a bunch of cases. It lost in every single case, was enjoined in every single case. One of those went all the way up to the US Supreme Court. And the parties asked for a partial stay of the holding, in particular as to the redefinition of sex discrimination to include gender identity. And the court rejected that, said no, they were entitled to a preliminary injunction. And that was unanimous. So all 9 justices agreed. Now it's a stay decision. There's not a lot of analysis, but one of the criteria for a preliminary injunction is likelihood of success on the merits. So the justices at least must have agreed that the plaintiffs had a decently high likelihood of success in the merits, and the fact that all 9 justices agreed that rule should be enjoined is sort of stunning. And its underlying premise is exactly the same as Whitaker and AC. So I think everybody expects West Virginia is going to win in the case before the U.S. Supreme Court. I think it's likely to abrogate or overrule Whitaker, but we're just going to see what comes out next summer.
Cory, you're a mother of girls. What do you say to moms and dads who feel powerless when they live in Wisconsin or they live in Illinois, New Jersey, California, having a big issue, Virginia, when their daughter is forced to change in the room with the biological boy or forced to compete? And despite what the Trump administration is attempting to do in the Department of Education and DOJ and OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, these districts persist. Like I said, Loudoun County, Fairfax County, they are challenging. They're ready to go toe to toe in Virginia, and they're going to challenge the federal government on the reclassification of sex to include gender identity. So what do you say to the many parents that come up to you and say, what do I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the legal overview that Luke just provided is really, really important for this, because we have many parents reach out to us and they don't understand the legal landscape surrounding this issue. And their initial reaction when we kind of like walk them through it is, well, that can't be the law. That can't be. And especially now under President Trump, there's this disconnect between our federal government is indicating that we're going to interpret Title IX as meaning boys and girls, women and men. And we still have these certain cases, certain court decisions where it's split, as Luke described, across the country. So I'm, on the one hand, really hoping for some clarity and an appropriate interpretation of Title IX in all contexts, sports, bathrooms, locker rooms. I think that would be a really, really great outcome. But I mean, as you know, some of our clients that we've represented in these types of issues have gone through these real world experiences and have told their stories as minors. They are their names are not out there. But for example, and I can't see here which one is on the screen, but just as one example, we had represented a few high school students, some girls in Westosha, and there was a male in their locker room when they were supposed to be getting ready for gym class. And there were only a certain number of kind of single stall areas where if they did want privacy, they could go in there and change, but there wasn't enough for every girl. So they would have to wait. And oftentimes some of them would be late for class. The girls were admonished for not being okay with changing in front of the male student. Some were even giving failing grades for being late to gym. And some of them told their parents they didn't want to go to gym if this is what it's going to be like. And I get that as a mom, as a former student athlete, I totally get that. There is something to be said about privacy and dignity and just feeling safe in spaces like that. So it's good to see things happening, and we hope that there's a good outcome.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, this story about Westosha, I was able to break on the Charlie Kirk show. And that was just a few months ago. So he had me on. I was on for 30 minutes, and we discussed this Westosha case. And he said it was the worst case he had ever heard. And he's heard a lot of them, but he said this was like he could not believe what was happening. And I can give the details. I'm not a lawyer, so I can say that it was a 16-year-old boy, fully intact genitalia, over 6 feet tall, very intimidating boy that was allegedly leering at girls, teenage girls, as they were changing in the locker room, making them feel very uncomfortable and unsafe. And unfortunately, the gender neutral bathroom and this happens all the time, that's where the biological females were forced to go to the 1 or 2 gender neutral bathrooms, while this boy could just sit in and change and do whatever he wanted in the girls' spaces. And that's why sometimes I have a problem with when you say gender neutral, because sometimes that's where the girls have to go. They're forced to use these gender neutral spaces and to give up their privacy, their dignity, and their space. So, this went completely viral. This story, it's outrageous. It's the thing that they tell you that never happens until it does, until it happens, and it happened right here in a very conservative area of Wisconsin. And
what's frustrating to me so much about this story is it's so immediately obvious that this is the kind of thing that is going to happen if we open up bathrooms to, whatever you identify with. And one of the things that was so frustrating about the Whitaker opinion is the court said, well, there's no evidence in this case that any kids have any real privacy concerns, and we don't actually believe that this is really going to be a privacy problem. And like anybody who's lived in the world or has children, who's grew up in a middle school, right? Everybody knows this is the sort of thing that's going to happen. And now we've been living with this rule for 8 years, and those stories are coming out. And it just sort of exposes what everybody knew all along, that, yeah, this is going to make a lot of girls feel uncomfortable. And it's going to create a situation that's ripe for abuse, right? If the rule is schools have to allow anybody who identifies as transgender to use whatever bathroom they associate with, there can't be like a test for you're transgender enough or you've transitioned enough. It has to be anybody. Otherwise, it's unadministrable. And then you can get students who want to abuse that entering women's spaces. And, that's a dangerous situation. And so, it's scary to tell your story if this has happened, but it's incredibly important because it illustrates why it is so critical to preserve sex-separated spaces. And so we're proud to be able to represent the Westosha students. We also represent a student from Sun Prairie who had really horrible experience in the locker room showers related to this. We represent a bunch of parents in the Elkhorn area school district who had the courage to speak up and oppose this. So I think more and more people are sort of raising their hand and saying, I have privacy concerns. I don't care what the Seventh Circuit says. I have deep privacy concerns and I want to protect my daughter. And I think there are plenty of school districts, to their credit, who are saying, yeah, we might lose in the trial court, but this is important enough that we are going to stick with this policy and we'll litigate it all the way if we have to. So it's only a matter of time, I think, until Whitaker's overruled. We just hope it happens sooner than later before more young girls are harmed.
And you were referencing the Sun Prairie case, and that was a case in which 4 14-year-old girls were showering and changing after a swim class, gym class, and they were studying swimming, and an 18-year-old biological male came in, disrobed, showered right next to them, unclothed, naked, and he said, I'm trans, by the way. And the girls were traumatized and terrified, and that's a whole nother, that could be a whole nother show to talk about. But what didn't happen was there wasn't a complaint filed. The girls did not get the opportunity to speak to a Title IX coordinator and file a complaint. Instead, they just tried to hush everything up. And so what is the current status? I know I talked to Dan Lennington, another attorney with Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, a while back. They were charging your firm an exorbitant amount of money. You just wanted to get their policy, right?
That's right. Yes, when we first raised concerns about the incident, we submitted an open records request, something that I thought was very basic. I think we asked for some correspondence surrounding the incident, and it had just happened a month ago, so it wasn't a long amount of time, and some documents related to the policy in place. and they requested prepayment for about $11,000. Fox News actually ran a story on that. Did we pay that? No, we did not pay that. However, in terms of the status of this, a federal investigation was launched under the Biden administration, actually. So even the Biden administration had concerns about how the school district in Sun Prairie handled this situation. And the fact that, as you said, they didn't offer supportive measures to the girls. The parents weren't informed. No one ever talked to the girls, even after they knew what had happened and who was involved. No one ever reached out, asked to interview, asked how the girls were doing. Although they never disputed that it was an 18-year-old male student, and they said that it should not have happened. So despite all of that, they still didn't comply with the procedural requirements under Title IX. Status right now, the investigation is still pending.
So yeah, and that's a lot of money. A regular, everyday family just requesting documents, FOIAing documents, they could never afford that. So that's why it's good you didn't pay that, because that sets this precedent that if you want to find out policies, get correspondence. These are all things that as parents, they are legally obligated to provide to us if we ask. And to say 12 grand, and then how much you want to bet a lot of that would be redacted even if they gave it to you. So the thing that never happens has happened in Wisconsin. It certainly has happened in Illinois. I've been to school board meetings there. So, but the good news is that because of President Trump, the administration, the policies that he has enacted, if you in Wisconsin, even though we have a Democrat governor, if you are a more sensible school board, you can implement policies that fall in line with the Trump administration, correct? And you can, in your school district, enforce Title IX as it's meant to be enforced, where the definition of male and female, that's it. There's no gender identity, and you don't have to allow boys and girls spaces, nor girls and boys spaces. Am I correct?
Yes-ish. I mean, Whitaker and Martinsville, those cases I've been talking about, are still on the books. That's still binding precedent for now in the Seventh Circuit. So if a school district has that policy and gets sued, a trial court is likely to say, I'm bound by the Seventh Circuit's previous rulings. I have to rule against you. But given that just this summer, the Seventh Circuit indicated that it wanted briefing on whether to overrule those cases, and given West Virginia v. BPJ pending, we sort of all know that it's only a matter of time before those cases are overruled. So, if I was a school district, I would adopt the policy anyway, because it's important enough to protect the privacy of girls in your school, but you just have to be prepared to litigate it if you get sued.
And what do you say to parents who are they're listening right now, and their daughter there's a biological boy on her team, or there's no safe space for her in a bathroom or locker room, or a boy's like there's a biological girl coming into his space. What is your advice? And a hint, I would imagine, to call Will or call and get some legal advice, because I know a lot of nonprofit legal organizations really want to take these cases, but first parents and students have to come forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's number one, reach out, but parents can also take their concerns up the chain in the school district, go all the way up to the school board, point out that, West Virginia case is pending, that the Seventh Circuit recently considered overruling Whitaker, that the Trump administration is taking enforcement action against school districts that allow open intimate spaces to the opposite sex, and same with sports teams. So, you might be able to persuade your school board to take the more sensible approach. So try that first, but short of that, reach out.
That's true. Now, real quick before we have to end, there is another great solution, Cory, that you can talk about that Will has been working on for a very long time. and it's the parental toolkit. So in the last few minutes, I'd like for you to talk about this really amazing resource.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is intended to be a resource for parents to either take a look at now or just have handy as things happen throughout the school year. I always say I hope that they never need it. But if they do, then we hope this is an invaluable resource for them. The bulk of it is legal explainers. So if there is a dispute with the school district, a lot of things we hear about are curriculum, concerns about curriculum in their child's class, access to instructional materials or their own child's educational file and records, Title IX, Title VI, surveys in schools, and a number of other things. If those things then come up, we've included these explainers with a sound legal explanation and basis and citations, but in a format that's about 3 or 4 pages to be able to just get an overview of what these various federal laws are. And we at Will, we're obviously based in Wisconsin. There are a few that are Wisconsin specific, but we note that in the toolkit. So any parent in any state, for the most part, should be able to use this as a resource. And one of the documents you have up on the screen right now, I'm so glad you paused here, is an explainer of Mahmoud versus Taylor. Will also has an opt-out form if you go to will-law.org/parents. And I know Moms for Liberty has a really good template as well. We want parents to use these tools and exercise their rights. If there's instruction going on in their child's classroom that violates their religious beliefs, they now have a right under United States Supreme Court case law to opt out of that type of instruction. So Will has created this fillable form that will generate a letter for parents to be able to give to their child's school and say, these are my religious beliefs I would like to opt out of. And it's kind of like a checkbox in terms of, what each individual parent would like to opt their child out of. So we have an explainer in the toolkit, and we also have that opt-out form. We also have
sounds amazing. That sounds like an amazing form, and I will link all of this up. Could you briefly explain Mahmoud v. Taylor for anyone who maybe is not aware of this Supreme Court decision and how important it is?
Yeah, I'll do my best to give an overview. This case originated in Montgomery County in Maryland. And it involved LGBTQ books being read to very young children, all the way down to kindergarten, related to gender ideology and sexual orientation. And what happened was the school was originally allowing parents to opt out of that type of instruction. And then they changed their policy. They didn't allow parents to opt their child out, and they didn't even give parents notice that these things were going to be taught. So what you had was a coalition of parents, Catholic, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, all coming together and saying, hey, we think you're violating not only our First Amendment rights to freely exercise our religion, but also our parental rights to direct the upbringing and the religious upbringing of our minor children. And to kind of fast forward, since I know we're just providing an overview, the court agreed with the parents. And they said, yes, that right to direct your child's religious upbringing, that also follows your child into the public school. So we're seeing a lot of parents fill out this form. It's really encouraging.
It is really encouraging. It is. I was in DC with the parents that filed suit when that decision was announced. One of great like political moments of my life. It was pretty, like, they were all crying. This was a long fight for them, and it was very difficult in their district, and I loved to see that the group, because you were right, it left, right, Democrat, Republican, Jewish, Muslim, the Christian, Catholic, all coming together to say, this isn't political. This is about the fact that we have our fundamental beliefs, deeply held beliefs, and they're being violated. And we don't want this curriculum or these books forced forced to our kids. Like there was no ability to opt out, which was abhorrent. And if anyone likes to listen, I've many times listened to the oral arguments, and it was really enlightening, really good.
Yeah, and one of the things the school district tried to argue was that, oh, it's too much of an administrative burden. Too many parents are opting out. This is too hard for us to enforce. The court rejected that argument. Sarah Parshall-Perry said something like, your First Amendment rights don't care about administrative burdens or something along those lines. So we're starting to see schools. It's interesting now. The school year just began. We're starting to see them react to these opt-out requests, and that's something that we're following really closely. So again, encourage parents to reach out if they have any concerns.
That's a good point, because there are parents that complain that they've turned in their opt-out form and their child is still subject to some of these materials and curriculum. So make sure that you first, like Luke said, go up the chain of command, start by talking to your teacher, talk to your vice principal, your principal, go to your superintendent, then your school board. And if you find that no one's listening to you, reach out, because Mahmoud v. Taylor, like this is precedent. This is the Supreme Court, a Supreme Court ruling. And hopefully very soon we have more clarity on Title IX and on sex separated sports and spaces or bathrooms, because we sure could use it. It's very confusing. And even for myself, and I've been doing this a long time, I find myself, I have to call you guys like, what do I say here? This is so confusing. What's the right thing to do? Can they legally do this? Can the school legally do this? And it's always like, well, kind of. And that's not a good place to be. We need clarity and common sense.
Yeah, and if people have questions in the process, they should feel free to reach out to us. We have an intake form on our website, and all the attorneys see every one of those that gets filled out. So please fill that out if you're having trouble.
Highly recommend. I love you guys. I love the work you do. And a lot of other partner organizations do great work, but we're so lucky to have you in Wisconsin. So thank you guys for joining me to discuss these issues. Cory, we'll do it again. I actually have pages more questions, and this is, I could talk to you guys for so long, but I really appreciate you coming on, and I know parents appreciate the work you've done, and I highly recommend that you go to the Will website, which I will provide in the links. And you can download this resource for free. And again, the opt-out forms, all of that is done for you. How long did it take to do this, Cory? A very long time, right?
Yeah, your comment that it was in the works for, it was an idea for several years. So we wanted to make sure it was done right, and something that parents could really use. And we're glad that it's now available.
You had like a little supplemental, and we've been waiting for this, and we're so happy to have it. And again, download it. It's free. This is an amazing resource, but donate if you like it. You're a nonprofit organization. Be sure to donate. Go to the website. If you're going to donate to anything, I highly recommend the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, because they do the best work, and it makes a real difference in the whole country, not specific to Wisconsin, but you take cases nationally, but you set precedent that's national, and every win is every little inch forward that we take. That's how you win.
Thank you so much. We're grateful to be able to do the work that we do. So we appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
More.
Yes, we do. Well, right now, I'm coming on the air. We're coming on the air. We're recording. So hi, I'm Scarlett Johnson, and this is Unleashed, presented by Moms for Liberty. And I'm with my friend, guest Meg Brock. And we're going to discuss her article, but I decided to press record right now just because we were talking about some really interesting things that I think a lot of moms and women do talk about. And we're talking about working out and body image and how much is too much, especially when you have daughters. Because Meg, you have a daughter, I have 4 daughters. And all I hear from my teenage daughters is, oh, I look fat, or I can't wear the, they're always struggling with their body image. It doesn't matter how thin they are. They feel too short, too tall, too fat, too skinny. Their hair's too curly, too straight. It's always something. So what you were saying, that sometimes you look in the mirror and you're criticizing yourself, because women just do that.
Just do it.
How long? I 12 years old, 13 years old, I remember in the girls' bathroom and all the girls lined up. Oh my God, my hair is so ugly. Oh, no. I've got pimples. Oh no, I'm so lined up, all of them, each one criticizing themselves. And someone had to say, no, you look so pretty.
No, I remember that.
It's
I mean, this was in the 90s. I grew up in the 90s where it was the Kate Moss era. So there was all that pressure. We talk about social contagions to be super skinny. But I remember putting myself on my first diet at age 11. And I think about that. I think, oh my gosh, that is just so sad. So I do feel like as a woman, as now a middle-aged woman, very aware of the choices that I'm making, and what am I teaching my daughter, and what am I exemplifying for her, and am I really trying to, as a woman, show her what it's like to be confident and to take care of yourself, but also not to be chasing some crazy standard of beauty. Because you're right, as women, we kind of spend our whole lives sometimes chasing these things and not just enjoying our femininity and just enjoying who we are as people beyond the surface of beauty.
Yeah. I like with my hair, your hair starts to go gray, you start dyeing it, and then you realize like how often you have to dye your roots. It's such a pain in the butt. And what's too much, and I'm middle-aged too, growing up through the 90s. I do Kate Moss, so skinny. I remember going on a diet of crackers and water, like salty crackers and water.
It's so sad when you think about how young. You think about how young you are. If you just tell your younger self, like, girlfriend, you're great. Like, you don't do this to yourself. This is not health. This is not healthy.
Yeah, and then of course, you still like that didn't last very long, but just that pressure to feel like, because so super skinny, and now supermodels, they're just bizarre. They're just then, because I also remember there was Cindy Crawford, there was the Claudia Schiffer, like they were really pretty and more feminine, and that era, that was like, I think that was the supermodel, like Naomi Campbell. That was like the Christy Turlington. That was the real supermodel era. Now there aren't any names. You can't name a model. I don't know the name of a single model. They actually look very bizarre. It looks like a Halloween haunted house show when they have these Milan, Paris shows. Like, women don't. It's weird, and I don't know.
We just gotta get to the middle. Hopefully, we raise girls who are feminine and strong and can be confident in who they are. And I think as women, we, the whole hair. I am starting to go gray. I haven't dyed my hair yet because I've been thinking about it literally since I was in my 20s, because I think I watched my mom, who went gray pretty early, spend like hours and hours of her life dyeing her hair. And I always thought, oh my gosh, that looks terrible. And so I just haven't, I'm not saying I won't ever, but it is interesting, these things that we just kind of accept as kind of continuum of now we have, now you hear about girls who are in their 20s getting their face Botox. And I just think, oh my gosh, they're these beautiful girls who are just so naturally pretty. I'm like, why are you doing that to your face? You're gorgeous without any of that. So it is really interesting. And I think in this culture where then we have, maybe we've gone too far from like super skinny to like having like, saying obesity is healthy, which it's not. Really, ultimately, we want to do is be healthy and just normal and take care of ourselves and not have these extremes. But we are living in a culture that is gravitating towards extremes right now. So that's kind of an uncharted territory right now, just trying to be normal.
Yeah, and I think everyone is everyone like healthy, athletic, but not too, to be. That's what's I think attractive to men. But even when I look around and you think, oh, she looks so good, it's someone who looks healthy, not like too skinny, and I'm like, that's so skinny, or obese, and you're like, oh, God, I worry like about a lot of different health problems that could happen with that. So I think healthy is ideal, and everything in moderation. A lot of doctors in my family, and the number one rule is no extreme diets. You intuitively know you should have some protein, you should have some dairy, you should try and eat vegetables raw, you should try fresh. We know what to do. It's just we're fast paced things. We don't like to take a lot of time anymore. And I think eating healthy, exercising, all like not having as much stress, a lot of these things mean time, and you have to be thoughtful. And so, but we'll talk about your article. It does kind of relate to this discussion because a lot of it is about, I think, maybe not your article, but the voting that happened this Tuesday. Women decidedly came out in New York, New Jersey, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and some other states. Decidedly, they came out voting for Democrats. And even men, a lot of those good numbers that we saw for Trump in 2024 flipped in certain counties. And that's what I saw. That's what concerned me, was that in counties that were won by Trump, that even that young male vote really dissipated. And a lot of people that voted for Trump did not vote for governor's races or other things. But why don't you talk a little bit about your article and what you found?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is in the Philadelphia suburbs, and it's a true purple county. It's a swing county and a swing state. And all throughout the election last year, there was quite a bit of attention that was paid to it because it really is a bellwether. And it was interesting. I mean, for me, like you, I was never really involved or I say involved or knowledgeable in any way about local government or about local politics or any of that. I just wasn't really interested. And then COVID was a game changer, as I know for you, and I'm sure many of your audience, where you were kind of like, wait a second, maybe I should care about these things. So it was just interesting back in 2021 in Bucks. So Bucks is a county that the Philadelphia collar counties, which are 4 counties that surrounded the suburbs, were really Republican strongholds till the 2010s. And it was in the Obama years where they won by one. Well, one flipped and then three flipped in 2019, which was really a result in part of I would say, anti-Trump, anti-MAGA energy from Democrats who are also shifting very far to the left. And so in Bucks in 2021, after a 2019 flip to blue, went fully red because of pushback from COVID that really drove out Republican voters. And I remember seeing there was 13 school districts in the county, and every district just naturally had this kind of little grassroots huddle of parents that was formed really separately from anything political. Like, it wasn't associated necessarily with the Republican Party. It was a coalition of just parents who were very concerned about school mitigation, and Democrats, independents, Republicans all really came together and ultimately voted more for Republicans, I think, because Republicans were anti-shutdown or ready to kind of drop COVID at that point. And so then in 2023, Bucks went blue again, in 2024 and went to Trump, and now in 2025 it just went totally blue on Tuesday night. So it's fascinating because you hear people on the online, right, if you will, talk about how the culture war is over or we won. I think maybe, I know with like the gender ideology issue, which is what I'm very much focused on, I feel like there are a lot of people who kind of perceived it as being over because, well, Trump won, he signed an executive order. And I think what maybe one of the big takeaways from Tuesday's election is that the culture war is still raging, particularly in swing states and swing counties like Bucks County.
So a couple points. What you said about the organic nature of what happened during COVID, because I can attest to that, because we formed a group whose name was so long. It was like the parents that we had this super long name, like and so it was, you could tell it was natural because it wasn't, it wasn't a good hook. We were just like the parents that support, our school district, blah, blah, blah. So that was everywhere, like in little areas, people formed groups, maybe even just around their school district. And then the groups, I know in my area, the groups came together a little bit, and it was like by county or, a couple school districts together, and we supported each other going to, hey, I'll go to your school board meeting if you come to mine, and we'll show up en masse. And when we had protest rallies, we'd have, our whole North Shore area. It was so organic. It wasn't at all related to the GOP. It wasn't related to any grassroots organization. It was completely organic. And so no one at first knew what to make of it. I don't think the media was really prepared for it. And so we kind of caught the whole system by surprise, and we won. And the unions didn't take us seriously, and they had no way to know what was going to happen. I think that they were totally blown away. They were blown away when we recalled 4 school board members. They were laughing at us until we did it. So we had the element of surprise. And the enemy, those, and I think those that are woke and seeped in left-wing dogma and ideology, and they just, they can't see the forest through the trees. They weren't ready for us, but then they did get ready, and they developed a message, and then they got very good at messaging against us. Book banners. They made us. They got a hold of the narrative for a little while, and we're able to fight back as we in locally. But it's not easy, especially when the SPLC starts to label you as a hate group in 2022. And that's for Moms for Liberty. We were labeled as a hate group, and a lot of other organizations were labeled as hate groups. And now we may sort of think, oh yeah, they're calling you a hate group, so what? 2022, it was a big, huge deal because the Southern Poverty Law Center still had a lot of gravitas. And it was really hard. And to this day, it's not easy to fight that label. So what you said there, that's one element for sure. But I want to ask about, you said 2024 Bucks went for Trump. Do you have in your article, and I'll look, what were those numbers and what was the change?
I think it was, so I mean, in presidential elections, if you go through, I mean, there's always a higher turnout. So there was, I believe it was like over 81% voter turnout in 2024 versus a 49% voter turnout that happened this week. Now, that's not like broken down to in terms of like voters affiliations, but that's just general turnout. And I think at least what happened in Bucks is that there were a lot of outside organizations that flooded the county in 2024 to really help get out the vote. I mean, something that I've observed or just did observe over the past 5 years, which was interesting to me, is that I think that the left has a lot more infrastructure on the ground, a lot more local infrastructure, and has invested a lot more into local elections than the right. In 2023, when school boards started flipping back to Democrat control for the first time, honestly, there were like hundreds of thousands of dollars that were invested in school board races. And I remember talking to friends who had been involved in school board, way before COVID, or just 5 years before COVID. And they were like, yeah, a typical school board campaign would be a couple $100s. Well, now there's this new precedent where thousands of dollars have been spent to take over these school boards. And it's really, it makes for an interesting scene locally, particularly if one side is investing, the other side's not really investing on local elections. It's going to be really difficult to win those. But then there's for example, in Bucks last year, the county commissioners went totally viral because they were doing a recount or trying to count for the Senate race, statewide Senate race. And one of the commissioners, the two commissioners who were Democrat and in charge, said at a public meeting, like voted to violate state election law openly. And it went totally viral. But I think that's the kind of stuff that really, when you think about how do local politics, how do they impact federal politics? We think a lot about federal politics impacting local, but I think that was a great example of how here's this critical swing county. We're talking about federal politics, and the local elections were absolutely impacting the policies of voters and whether or not the election was going to have integrity.
That's a good point. And I'm pulling up your Bucks County voter registration, and here Republicans outnumber Democrats, and that's pretty impressive. And then to go to that was 2024.
Well, that's what's so interesting about this past election. So now, I think in Pennsylvania, there's a very large number of independent voters. So I think that's something that really comes into play when you think about when people are messaging. It's not enough to just you have to get your party out, but you also need to get the independents on your side. But then the fact that there was such a large loss for the Republicans really, kind of speaks to perhaps the leadership on the ground of the Republican Party, and how it really, with the outside efforts in 2024, managed to get people to come out, but locally being unable to do that. And it's just a very interesting place, Bucks County. There's a lot of things you could talk about.
I think, and I think it's a really good idea to talk about Bucks County, because it is a signal. There are so many counties like this all across the country, particularly in these purple blue states, or states that have gone, they go back and forth. They've Democrat, Republican. So Bucks County, I think, is a very interesting highlight. Looking here, the voter turnout, 49% for, and it was 81% in the presidential election. A voter turnout of 49% is actually
pretty high for a municipal.
Very high.
Yeah.
Very high.
I think a lot.
Political science. This is very high.
I think a lot of that, it's interesting to look at the trends, is because, Pennsylvania is kind of a mess with their mail-in ballot situation. So I think that the Democrats have really adapted to that a lot better than the Republicans have. And so regardless of how you feel, personally, I don't think mail-in ballots are a great way to hold elections, but that is the system that's in place. And so unfortunately, you have to work within the system that you have. And I think that probably is favoring the Democrats more at this point than the Republicans, regardless of how anyone feels about the actual system.
Now, you write that the Philadelphia suburbs, they were a stronghold for local Republicans. This is true in Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan. In a lot of states that now have blue governors, the suburbs were once the stronghold. What do we know about educated suburban citizens and voters? They are the most reliable voters, right?
Yeah.
And so high propensity voters. And at one time, Republicans dominated amongst high propensity voters. And the more educated, it's in the past days, the more likely that they were going to vote Republican. That scenario has flipped entirely flipped. Suburbs are now more of a stronghold for Democrats in a lot of areas, particularly in Philadelphia and Wisconsin. Not that they're not winnable, because Trump won a lot of suburbs, but it is a whole different scenario where the high propensity voters now are leaning Democrat, and the low propensity voters are leaning Republican. Do you think that conservatives, and we have to say Democrat, Republican, because there's two parties you can vote for. Okay. But for conservatives, center-right folks, is the messaging hitting them? The new makeup of who we're going to target, the MAHA movement, MAGA movement, Trump, like the union, the blue-collar union worker. Do you think that there needs to be a recalibration of messaging for 2026 so that Republicans can win these people without Trump on the ballot?
I mean, I think coming from viewing politics as a normal person, which is what I would say
Yes.
that I
That's what
do.
I'd like to talk from a normal person's perspective. Do you
I think, yeah, well, I think, most people, I mean, and I'm kind of really, I touched on this in the article. I think about how so many parents were coming to school board meetings in 2021 because they were feeling something that was impacting them, was impacting their children. And then when that feeling went away, when the masks finally went away, when life went back to normal, people just went back to the normal lives and didn't really care anymore. So I think the messaging that people are going to get is whatever they're feeling and whatever's impacting them. And so when I think about right now, I mean, I think that there's a lot of people are having a hard time economically. Things are still very expensive. You go to the food store and you're like, geez, I'm paying a lot of money for food that maybe 5-10 years ago it was very different. So I think people feel that. And I think that in terms of I think there's a lot of disconnect maybe within what happens online and what happens in normal life. And I think normal people just really want to, moms, like, you want to raise your family and you just want to be able to take care of them, and that's really the goal for a lot of people who might be a low propensity voter. So I think I don't know. I don't know that when you look at what happened in Bucks and you see it going red for Trump last year and then losing the county elections for things that are really important, like district attorney. I mean, a lot of people are considered the district attorney actually who won. It led the Bucks County Law Department to sue me 5 times, and a court ruled he acted in bad faith in that they acted in bad faith in doing that. So that's now the person who is going to be responsible for upholding the law in the county. Like that's a big deal. I don't know that the normal person gets that,
It's a very big deal. I've just survived a lawsuit. It's a big deal if the DA is going to go after a parent like they went after you. That it's a huge deal. Look at Jay Jones is now the Attorney General of Virginia after it was revealed that he texted the fantasy of children dying in the arms of their mother, his opponent's wife, that their children died. Things that you'd be done. 10 years ago, you'd be done.
And frankly, you would want anyone on either, like any politician, I don't care, like regardless of affiliation, you don't want someone saying those kind of horrific things about anybody. This is America. Like, we want to love, like care about all Americans, it's just disgusting.
And Jay Jones wasn't texting like a good friend. He was texting someone that was he's a Democrat. He was texting a fellow like Republican that's like, hey, I mean, he felt so comfortable like saying these things, like, and didn't seem all that uncomfortable defending what he did. And that Abigail Spanberger just sort of was like, shrugged her shoulders. Well, orange man bad, so who cares? That's their answer for everything. Well, yeah, maybe he's a terrible person, but someone else is worse. So, vote. It's this irrational Trump derangement syndrome that affects. But and there's a post here, Bucks County Democrats, pick a state race, send them money, ask how you can help. Flipping the PA House. So they were getting outside money, telling people, hey, like pick this race. If you are a Democrat and you're living in Florida, send money to Pennsylvania. Help us defeat Trump here. And that's the kind of messaging they've also used in Wisconsin. But I know you're on a hard step. So I would like, we'll do this again next week so you
Yeah.
talk longer. But I
Yeah.
really liked what you said at the end of this article, that maybe 49% of parents voted, but 100% of parents are going to feel the full impact of policies. So what's your kind of closing statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reality that I hope that more that people need to understand. And maybe even when you're not, I think about, you think about policies, you think about like what just happened in New York, like electing such a radical person to be their mayor, and you think maybe it's going to take a city like New York to really feel the full brunt of those policies, before there's a turning. But the thing that's so sad about that is that at the end of the day, it's going to harm people, and that's what you don't want. You know, you want to see, we want to create a country where everyone can thrive and where our children can thrive. And people talk a lot about the American dream right now. Well, to me, the American dream is always, it's not been about what I'm going to have or what you're going to have in your generation. It's that the generations behind you could have a better life than you if they work hard, they make good choices. And I think that's really what we're seeing kind of collapse right now. And I think there's a lot of evidence being pulled up about how the younger generations are realizing like they're not going to achieve a life that was better than their parents. And so I think, why do we, both you and I are moms who weren't involved in anything, and now we've both won lawsuits, we've written things, we've spoke at events, and I think it's a testimony that really the beautiful thing about being an American and about having your citizenship is that any person really can make a difference. And whether it's your difference is you vote in an election, you run for office, whatever that is. And I just think that is such a gift. And if we don't treasure and value that gift, we are in fear of losing it. And if not for ourselves, losing it for our kids and those behind us. And that's, in my opinion, is actually worse. So that's what I would say with that.
You have to care, and that was the tone of your whole article, like showing the title, and we'll link to it and under the comments, because I as soon as I read it, I said we have to talk about this, because the real reason parents' rights took an election night clobbering. Now, there were some bright spots in Pennsylvania. There's some school board races won. Moms for Liberty endorsed candidates did win. So there's a few bright spots, but there's, it's, people have to see school board races as important again, beyond COVID. They have to, even if you don't have a kid in the district, it matters. It matters who's running your school board. It matters because you're going to pay the price. You may not have kids there, but you're paying for it through your property taxes. And these are the future citizens of your community. These are American citizens, and how they're being taught matters. Just look at New York City. Look what happens when you indoctrinate kids into this lens. They view the whole world through the lens of oppression and race, and cultural Marxism is the underpinning of most of their educational life. And that doesn't just go away. That doesn't just like, oh, I'm 21 now. Now I'm thinking, now I'm suddenly, no, that's a lifelong thing. And we've got to get a handle on it and care about it. And, I guess we'll spend the next year trying to figure out how we can message better, like a lot of different groups. What can we do differently? How do we get people out to vote? So I'm glad that you wrote this article and told the truth, even a painful truth, even something maybe we don't want to hear, but we need to. We cannot say, well, they're blue. They're blue areas. We're always going to go blue. Let's not make too big of a deal about it. Look at the numbers. And Meg provided some, but in Virginia, that was a heavy loss. Look at the numbers. Areas that went for Trump completely flipped. People that should have come out to vote didn't. Why? These are questions we have to ask. So, well, thanks for coming on, Meg. We'll
Thanks
talk
for
some
having
more
us,
later.
Scarlett. All right, thanks.
And thanks for writing. Thanks for all that you do. I love your work. So
I
you
appreciate
speak
that.
for us. You speak
Thank
for
you.
us.
Well, I am
Right.
just, we're all moms just trying to make the world better for our kids, right?
Yes. Well, you speak to the regular mom, and so I
Mhm.
think that's what we love about you. Well,
Yeah,
bye, Meg.
thanks,
Thanks
Scarlett.
a lot. We'll talk again.
All right.
Bye. Hi, I'm good.
It's good to see you. So, yeah, I want to let everybody know. Well, first of all, I hope that you would agree with that as I'm setting up this portion. I think I can't tell you how often I talk about it on the program. Even last hour, I was talking about the importance of the grassroots, right? Those that are willing to get off the sideline and in the game, and those that are willing to fight for what is significant to us. You know, the Constitution, right? The constitutional republic that we are. But in your case, with this win, let's talk a little bit about what happened with you, the full story about what went on there.
Well, you couldn't be more right. Grassroots are going to save America. They already have, and they contributed. I mean, I think they were the deciding factor into the win of President Trump. And it was the everyday person, the average American, the mom like me, who 5 years ago, I was not political at all. I had never voted in a school board election, but after COVID, I got involved. I saw what was happening and I saw what they were doing to our kids, and they were treating our kids like a disease. And I had to do something. I'm a mother of 5 kids. So I ran for school board. I was very vocal. And so a lot of the woke people in my community didn't like me very much. And in 2022, it was a very different time than it is now. People were afraid to even talk about things like critical race theory. And we didn't all live in the free state of Florida. You know, I visited a lot, but there was a lot of political persecution. And I was one of those victims when I called out my school district for having a DEI coordinator, a social justice coordinator who was, quote, skilled in equity promotion. They had this person on the staff, and I simply called out saying we should not be re-educating our children and indoctrinated them into this woke political ideology, that kids should be educated in school, not indoctrinated.
Right. And so ultimately you called them out for what was legitimately what they were doing. And somehow it became a defamation lawsuit. Is that what happened?
Yes. Yes. Saying woke. I mean,
Right.
woke was considered defamatory. I felt like I was in an alternate universe. Parents aren't extremists for demanding transparency. We're not extremists. I'm Puerto Rican, by the way. I'm not extremist for saying I don't want my kids to be judged by the color of their skin, instead the content of their character. And I don't like critical race theory and its roots in Marxism. And I certainly didn't want my kids to attend school to be told that there are 137 genders. So when I spoke out about this, I was sued and I was facing a jury trial. This was a 3-year lawsuit. And you know it's political persecution when they're demanding all of your financial records for 7 years, your credit card statements. When you get a letter from attorney demanding the confiscation of your computer, your phone, your iPad, all for saying woke, that's what I did. And so I was very frightened. It was a very dark time, and this was very costly litigation, tens of thousands of dollars, and the potential of a 6-figure lawsuit, as I had lost all of my appeals and was facing a jury trial in a blue city for my political opinions. So the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty took my case. They took it on appeal. They went to the Wisconsin Appeals Court, and here I am now. We won. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty and for Moms for Liberty and for sticking by my side. And, you know, it's very surreal.
Yeah.
But you were right when you said the world that we would live in, that people like Mandami would have us live in, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, their world, it's It is a scary place to me because I got a taste of it, and you wouldn't be able to speak out at school board meetings. You couldn't call out curriculum. You couldn't say, hey, that's woke. That's radical ideology. You couldn't say those things in their world.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing. We live through that. So when it's tangible, when you live through this, here you are, a mom, you call somebody woke, all of a sudden there's this defamation lawsuit gets tossed, which is wonderful. But at the same time, how people were bullied, they knew that they could lose a job, they could lose friends, there are all kinds of things that would have happened. And this was legitimate. Like this legitimately happened to all of us. It's tangible. And sometimes this is why I think it's so important that we speak to the grassroots and how the left plays the long game. Listen, they'll lose a battle, but they'll try to win a war, and they'll keep fighting. They don't go away. Just because you won this battle, for example, even having this defamation case tossed, does not mean that one day in the future, when, again, they will be in power once again, that they'll try this again. But we have to remember it was tangible for us. Like, these things actually happened. We were around. It's not some book that we read about a time a long time ago. We lived it. And so we have to be vigilant, and we have to continue to fight on that grassroots level against those forces that right now, and as we're talking about elections even, how we have to be worried about that, how things could change at the snap of a finger, We can't forget.
We can't forget what they did to our kids. They masked our kids. They isolated them. They forced them to stand 6 feet apart. They had them walking around schools holding plexiglass dividers. They did, they had these long, if you were exposed to COVID 28 days out of school. Then when kids finally were in school, it was like juvenile detention centers and indoctrination centers where they prioritized a political ideology. After George Floyd, they wanted to reprogram our kids. I sat through a lot of the professional development given to teachers, and I still do to this day. It hasn't stopped. You just maybe aren't paying attention. They are giving the same professional development. Look at Randy Weingarten. Yeah. Look at the last NEA conference where the whole thing was an anti-Trump rally. It wasn't anything about education. It was all about, we've got to get Trump. And they think the way to stop us and stop our movement and freedom and end our constitutional republic is to get our kids. Right. They're not having their kids. Right. They don't have their own kids. So they need to take ours, and we can't let them.
Yeah, important point. All right, well, we're up against the break. This was, great news. It's great to hear great news when we're talking about our constitutional republic and free speech wins. So it was great to have you on. All the best. God bless, and we hope to see you again soon, okay?
Thank you very much. Academy. And I wanted to have her on to talk about some exciting things coming up as soon as Monday. So Missy, take it away and talk a little bit about M4L Academy and what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. We are the Academy. I like to say we're the Academy for parents, grandparents, and friends that are dedicated to fighting for the survival of America and who know or want to know why defending parental rights specifically is such an important part of that fight. Because I think sometimes it's easy for people to forget that, I don't know, we hear things like terms like parental rights and think, you just kind of gloss over it and don't think of how foundational that is to the fabric of our community, of our culture, of our society, of our country. And ultimately where I see it coming down, and this is zooming back a little bit to look at the 10,000 foot view, if you will, but it's preserving the nuclear family and fighting against collectivism and communism, because that is really America's biggest enemies. and what we are fighting, the ideology that we're fighting the most. So that's at the highest level. And then what we do is we dive into the different topics that impact kids, schools, and parental rights. Some of them are going to be really obvious, especially things that you'll learn about in school, or you'll see the kids learning about in schools and curriculums. And some of it may not seem quite as obvious of why it would be maybe impacting parental rights or where it's touching parental rights. This month is a particularly interesting topic for me personally. My background, as you know, is in technology, all in business. So I really don't have as much, I was always politically aware of the issues, but I wasn't necessarily as involved as I thought I was. I thought I was pretty involved. So technology is very close to my heart. And what I found fascinating as I've been unpacking this what is our topic this month? It's ed tech in particular, education technology, data collection, and AI. We had an amazing debate at Moms for Liberty's Summit talking about AI in the classroom, and we're going to be expanding on all of the technology and how it impacts kids in this month. So what you're showing here, I'm really excited about. I hope everyone will come and join me for the live stream. We're going to be featuring two amazing speakers. First is Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. He is an educator turned neuroscientist. And I have to tell you, he is so fun to listen to. He's super engaging, really interesting. And what he talks about especially is unpacking how we learn. So why we learn the way we do, why this EdTech revolution that was promised, just these brilliant golden age scholars, right, from our kids that are the digital natives, if you will. Instead, we're not seeing that. Our kids are struggling, and there's so many areas they're struggling. So he unpacks why that is, because of how we learn. The other guest that we have on Monday is Mandy Haman from Screen Strong. Their organization is incredible. They actually have curriculum that parents can bring to the school board to present as options in school for teaching about how kids' brains are impacted by screens. So I am so excited for this conversation. It's going to be great. So let me pause for a second because I could just talk about this all day. So
I'm actually really interested in this because you're right. The belief was, with all of this technology, this is going to be so beneficial. Kids are, it's like you're going to have so much more time to learn more and be more efficient and to just be more productive. But we're finding the opposite, that less productive, not as engaged, not retaining as much information, struggling even psychologically. So I want to hear more from someone like him about what's happening. And when you say data collection, what do you mean by that? Are you talking about surveys in schools?
Great question, because I think a lot of us think of surveys as that first bit of where data collection is happening, especially at least those of us who are paying attention. But really, the other scary part of the data that's being collected is in the learning management systems, the school platforms. So think like PowerSchool and Canvas and these other ones that are pulling together so much more than just grades about our kids. The surveys are uploaded in there. There's biometrics that are put in there, tracking their moods. That is somewhat through surveys, so social emotional learning type of information, personal information on on the children's families. It's really scary, not to mention the overhaul behaviors on computers themselves, because a lot of these platforms, they have different educational software that is built right in or installed. It comes installed on the computers that they're rolling out, or iPads or whatever type of device. So the kids are able to access these various platforms, websites, software, etc. But a lot of those serve up ads. They are also then tracking what sort of information the child's looking up. And one of the things that we're going to unpack a little bit more in the social media month, which is next month, is how manipulative the algorithms have become, to where these big companies are able to, they have like digital twins of everybody, which that is very disturbing to think of, quite frankly. And that's why when we hear, you know how it is, right? That you like think about buying something and all of a sudden you're getting an ad for it on Facebook, right? So apparently it's so creepy, and it's not necessarily even something you're talking about. It's the fact that your digital behavior is so tracked that they're able to predict what you're going to need before you even think you need it. It is insane. We're talking like Minority Report type of stuff. It's pretty wild. But think of it though, if they've got this data, behavioral data that they're tracking on little kids that's 13, 14 years of data tracking, they're getting to know you pretty well. So far beyond surveys, although the surveys are really intrusive, just that.
So I have to say, my husband and I just signed my daughter up for basketball, and they have a new system. Like 10 minutes into it, they were asking us questions like, what's the orthodontist, the number, the address, the dentist, insurance for, like, my husband's like, why are they asking all these questions? And finally we're like, okay, we're done now. It was a lot of questions about us, a lot of details. And I thought, that's weird. I don't remember ever having to fill this out. Like, it was the name of your physician and maybe insurance provider, but her dentist, her orthodontist, their number, their address, her optometrist. I was like, what? Like, this is now getting weird.
That is pretty excessive. It makes me think of the connection as well to the whole child community schools, right? That it's pushed, that the government's trying to push this idea that they'll be able to take care of your kid in every way. And I can't say that this is what's happening for sure, but I see them pulling in this data and maybe using that to say, what's going to be the easiest way to implement and convince people that they need to be going to our health clinics at schools. Also, I mean, that's a slightly different topic for sure that we're going to be covering in the future, but
or marketing, some kind of marketing, like they're trying to determine, where they're going. And then maybe they'll go to that provider and say, hey, a bunch of our parents, like, we could help market something. Like, there's something that they're going to do with that data. And it's not because they're worried that she could have an eye emergency. Like, I don't know, like, just call, we'll be there, or call the emergency contact. I don't know if there's going to be an orthodontic emergency on the basketball court.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe if she gets punched in the face or something or elbowed, right?
Yeah, they'd go to the ER. They wouldn't say, like, call the orthodontist 3 days a week. I mean, you only see, like, parents, the struggle is real trying to arrange orthodontic appointments around their school schedule, right? I know that there's people that feel me on that.
Yes. Yeah. Any doctor's appointments, I feel are insane. Real quick, I want to talk about another event that we're going to be doing because it's coming up next week on Thursday. We have the Rhetoric for the Republic, which this is the new debate event that we're doing. This is the actual recording of it. It's recorded live in DC, and you can come. I want everyone to come. Registration is free. There's food and drinks included. We have some amazing speakers that are talking about EdTech's success or failure. Basically, has this EdTech revolution proved to be as amazing as it was supposed to be? I'm pretty excited. Our one speaker speaking against EdTech is Andy Liddell from the EdTech Law Center. And then speaking for, or more on the positive for EdTech, is Sahel Khan from Microsoft. And Microsoft is a pretty big company with a lot of fingers in the pie for EdTech. So I'm very excited to have this conversation.
That sounds great. And I wish I'm going to be at the December event. I'm unable to attend this one because I have a prior commitment, but it's really fun. And I went to the inaugural event, and I got to talk to the speakers afterwards, and they were amazing. It was such a great conversation. So I highly encourage people to attend. And if you can't attend, then we will air it at some point. But attending live, if you are in the area, I mean, and the food was amazing.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
food, there's good conversation. And if you're in the area, and CPI is a great area, so stop in and join. It's fun. And you're in the area, you know where CPI is, and you know that they do a lot of cool events. So
yeah, they're really, it is such a neat place. And you'll get a chance to talk to the speakers, ask them some questions, have some good food, get to meet other like-minded people. We will be taking questions from the audience. So I definitely would love, but we're also going to be considering some pre-screened ones as well. So if folks want to submit a question, you can email the questions to me at m4lacademy@momsforliberty.org, or there's also information at our website, m4lacademy.org. If you go check out there, you can register, it directs you over to the registration. Again, it's free. Just need to register so that we can get a good head count for it. But yeah, we're pretty excited. It's going to be a good time. And then we will be airing the recording on Monday, the 24th of November.
okay, Monday the 24th. All right, so 5:30 to 7:30 Eastern time. If you are in the DC or surrounding area, go to CPI on Capitol Hill and attend this event live. There is great appetizers, and you'll be able to talk to like-minded people, and so you'll have some fun. So after work, stop by. If you were working in DC, one of our many friends, or if you're Moms for Liberty, we've got a lot of members that are short drive away, so come on by, and it'll be like Summit all over.
Yeah, that'll be good. It's pretty exciting.
All right. Well, thanks, Missy, for coming on and talking about this. And I'm going to give everyone a little bit of a appetizer, a teaser of what you can expect when you watch these programs. You can also go to our YouTube channel, where all of the previous things that you've done, which are tremendous, even from last year. So many different things. What are some of the topics from last year that we have on our YouTube channel?
We in the spring semester, we talked about social emotional learning, critical race theory, and DEI. We covered restorative justice, which is so insidious and just plaguing society. Then, of course, gender ideology and comprehensive sexuality education. There's so many resources available and everything. I've dove deep into these topics. So you can head to m4lacademy.org, check out our resource library. There's a rabbit hole on every single one of them. If it's a topic that you really want to go deep on, then we've got lots of information available there. But one quick thing too, on the YouTube channel, I have a separate interview with Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath that I did release. It is really fun and interesting. Even my 18-year-old daughter found it fascinating. So I feel like that says something, because not too many 18-year-olds are going to be like, yeah, let me watch this educational content. But she loved it. So.
Oh, great. Well, head to our YouTube, and I'm going to find that banner right now to put up there. And watch. There's so much content from moms that we're doing right now. It's something new that we're doing, and I'm really proud of all of that work. And I think now more than ever, when you see what's happening in New York, it's a good idea to brush up on some of the things that we maybe thought we had moved past: critical race theory, restorative justice, SEL, what it looks like in the classroom, how these topics are covered in the classroom, so that you can identify it and make sure that the schools are held accountable, and you're opting your kids out when you can, and when you can't, that you're contacting us and getting legal help so that you can be sure that you can opt your kids out of some of these divisive ideologies. But and if you're a mom on the go, you can listen. I listen to YouTube a lot. I can't even watch it, but it's in the background. I'm listening. So if you don't have a lot of time to go down the rabbit hole, you can listen to these lectures, and they really inform you. Like, you get the whole, the background, how it looks, what's happening now, and then what you can do about it. And so I highly recommend that if you want to learn more, or if you know someone who's just, their eyes are just now being opened and they're like, what's social emotional learning? I don't know what that is. Well, this is, rather than try to explain it to them because it can be difficult, send them to Moms for Liberty, momsforliberty.org. And I'm putting up the website right here, m4lacademy.org. We'll have all of those resources, everything that you need. Missy and her team have worked very hard to put together this amazing website that's really pretty to look at and very easy to use. So I highly recommend it.
Getting more every day, every month. We are adding new topics. So, and if you guys, always want to ask if there's something that you're seeing that, or a topic that you've heard about that you would like to see us dive a little bit more into, please send me the information, reach out, let us know some topics that you'd like to learn more about it so we can add it to our list.
Great. Yeah, there's always something new popping up. And then there's there's different speakers, different experts to talk to, different moms, because you've talked to some of our Moms for Liberty members and chapter chairs and their experience and how they have fought back and won, how they have conquered the system. And that's especially helpful for us because it's nice to hear from one of our own. Here's what it looked like for me. Here's what I did. You can do this too. So,
and I see it also as, it's one thing to talk about the theoretical and have the idea of what to do, but actually seeing how it gets done in practical and implementing it on the ground, that is sometimes a little bit different. So knowing that the theoretical can translate to the actual is helpful for someone like me.
Oh, it's helpful for me. I think it's helpful for everyone because otherwise people will say, well, the thing that never happened, that never happens. And then it does. And sometimes you could hear someone's story and think, oh, thank God that's not happening to me. And a few months later, it's happening to you or someone in your family, or your child brings home an assignment. And suddenly you're like, oh, now I know what this is. I remember hearing about this. So that's happened to me many times. All right, Missy. Well, thank you for coming on. And I look forward to seeing you again in person very soon. And I hope that, I'm going to put this up again, everyone, just Thursday, November 13th, that's just around the corner. Make sure that if you are in the area that you attend this amazing opportunity, Rhetoric for the Republic, Ed Tech Success or Failure. And then on Monday, so that's just in a few days, on Monday, this will be live streaming, Wired and Watched 101, EdTech Data Collection and AI, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, live streaming on all of our social media platforms and YouTube. So we'll have it here on X. You can watch it on X. Also, all of the other platforms. And if you can't make that, make sure you check it out on YouTube. So that's great. Missy, fun talking to you. It's Friday.
Always good talking to you.
All right. Bye now.
See ya.
Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to M4L Academy. I'm Missy Karwowski, Director of M4LA, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today as we tackle education technology. You know, those laptops, one-on-one devices, tablets, and now, yes, even artificial intelligence. It's all swept through the schools over the past 2 decades. And, you know, we were promised that these digital wonders would transform learning, make our kids smarter, and maybe even help them leap tall buildings in a single bound. But what if the reality is a little less super and a lot more sobering? Well, our guest, Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath, is a neuroscientist, educator, and author who's spent years unpacking the science of learning, and he's about to help us understand it too. He'll help us understand why, despite all the hype and billions spent, EdTech might actually be hurting our kids' learning a lot more than helping it. Through eye-opening research from around the world, combined with decades of brain science, he challenges the assumption that more tech and more screens must equate to better learning. Instead, he reminds us why human connection, focus, and deep thinking are still the real superheroes in education. So let's dive in. Welcome back to class. Welcome to the program, Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath.
Thank you so much. I loved that introduction. You had some really, really good ways of kind of framing all this. I like that a lot.
Well, I think you do a fantastic job of the way you frame this entire situation, the scenario, because you take it and you take down these very complex ideas and make it very understandable. So I really appreciate that. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, first of all, and what got you motivated to look at this stuff?
Absolutely. So I was a teacher originally back in the day, about 2 decades ago. So believe it or not, teaching is my passion. That's all I ever really wanted to do. But back when I was teaching, that was the decade of the brain. So I figured, all right, if I go and learn about the brain, I'll be a better teacher. And I thought that'd be like a year or two of my life, but that's how I got stuck in academia doing neuroscience for now 20 years. Once you start, you really can't leave. But that whole time I study what's called the science of learning. Basically, how do human beings learn? How does memory work? How does attention work? And I've worked with schools for decades now to say, cool, if this is how learning works, what do we do as teachers? What do we do as students? And it's only really been in about the last 5 years that's been morphing into, why aren't kids learning very well these days? And that's where the tech stuff has really come in to say, look, if we know how learning works, we can ask, does the tool align with that? And if the answer is no, maybe that's one of the answers to the questions we're asking about why kids are struggling right now.
I think that's really important. There is such a focus on this idea that more screens equals better learning, right? But that clearly is not a flawed assumption. And was there a pivotal like turning point that made you start looking at that?
No, it was very weird. I ran a study, this would have been probably like 10 years ago, where we were looking at binge watching behavior. So it kind of started as a fluke where I was just looking at that question. Do we learn better when we binge versus not? And that tech just kept expanding into more and more aspects of ed tech to say, well, it's not just Netflix. It's what about Duolingo? What about computers? What about one-to-one laptops? And it all kind of ballooned from there. And I think an important thing to remember as we go through this today, especially, is I'm going to be coming from an angle of pro-learning. That's all I care about is learning. I am not anti-tech. People will immediately say, oh, you're anti-tech, you're a Luddite. Cool, call me whatever you want to. No, I'm just pro-learning. If tech helped learning, I'd be the first one to say use it. It just doesn't. So most of what I'm going to argue is you'll see it's the reason why the data is so bad is because if you better understand how humans learn, you can adapt to that learning. You can make learning easier for them. And tech just doesn't do it that way.
So now then what we're seeing, I believe, right, is that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are showing the first measured cognitive declines versus prior generations, which is pretty crazy because we're in school longer and learning more things than ever. Where are we seeing these statistics? Can you show some of that?
Oh man, you will see it across the board. So if you just want to go pure cognitive, every generation have improved on their parents on measures of memory, of attention, general intelligence, sustain, self-control. Every generation has been better than their parents on these cognitive measures. And that's exactly what we want. We want kids that are faster, better, smarter than we are. Gen Z is the first generation to dip on all those. There's a thing called the reverse Flynn effect, where for century, we've seen everyone go up. Now in the Western countries anyway, it's now plateaued and it's starting to dip, where now kids have worse memory than their parents, worse attention than their parents, lower IQ than their parents. And Gen Alpha is doing a little bit worse than them. So we're now going down for the first time ever. Researchers do what's called renorming. Basically, let's say we all as adults take a test today, and then our kids all take the same test. If they score significantly higher or lower than us, in order to make our two tests comparable, what they're going to do is just smush the two tests together. They're either going to give our kids extra points to make it look like they're the same, or take away points from them to make it look the same. Basically, they're going to take two different measures, and so we can compare it, they're going to renorm it and just kind of push it up to say it looks equivalent. So they renorm every test. So every year looks about the same.
Supposedly, we were promised, of course, years ago that these devices are going to help student outcomes, student learning, but clearly the data indicates that is not happening. So how can you explain why this is happening? Like, why are these gains not being realized?
Yeah, I'd say there's really dozens of small explanations, but there's three what I'm going to call intractable explanations. These are things that so long as tech exists as it always exists, they'll never be able to overcome them. The first concerns attention. So all learning, the key to all learning is focused attention. And one of the best ways to kill attention is multitasking. Believe it or not, the human brain cannot tackle more than one focused task at a time. But if you want to try and pay attention to two things, the brain basically has to reset itself and quickly jump between the two things. We call it task switching. People don't do two things at once. They do two things separately and just really quickly switch. The problem is every time you switch, you start to go slower. Your brain starts to get confused. So your accuracy drop. And for whatever reason, we don't know why, your brain will start using a secondary memory system when you're multitasking. So your memories become basically unusable. So if you multitask while you learn, you go slower, your accuracy drops, and your memory tanks. It's like the worst thing you can do for learning. Cut to technology. So now we put a kid in front of a screen and we say, all right, kids, time to learn. You got to remember, kids post-COVID since 2023, teens and tweens age 8 to 18 spend over 2,500 hours every single year. That's over 100 days doing nothing but multitasking on screens. Now, when we say time to learn, most of them will only make it about 6 minutes before they jump back to what they know, which is multitask. Open this tab, talk to my friend. And so we call this the intractable problem of primary function. If tech only ever existed in schools and was only ever understood as a learning tool, may have been the most powerful thing we have. But the second they entered the home, and more importantly, the pocket, human beings stopped seeing them as learning tools and started seeing them as entertainment tools. Now, when we try and shoehorn in the function of learning, most human beings cannot overcome that obstacle, and they go right back to doing the number one thing you can't do when I need you to learn. The second issue has to do then with empathy. No human being has empathy. You do not have it. I do not have it. Empathy is not an emotion like joy or happiness. All emotions are personal. Empathy, by its very definition, is transpersonal. And we can measure it. So I'll never be able to measure your happiness, but I can measure empathy. When two people start to interact, their bodies will begin to synchronize. They will begin to breathe at the same rate. They will begin to blink simultaneously. Their hearts will start to beat at the same time. If I could image their brains start to sync up. That is empathy. We define empathy as biological synchrony between two people. And it's a very measurable thing. Why does any of this matter? Human beings have developed for 150,000 years empathy. It turns out empathy is our primary learning mechanism. When we begin to empathize with another human being, we begin to learn from them, because in a very real sense, we start to think like them in that moment. They know how to pull us over struggle. We get motivated by that. Empathy is one of the key drivers to all learning. Empathy requires two pairs of biology syncing up. What is one thing technology simply does not have? Biology. Bingo. It doesn't have a brain. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't have a brain or lungs. So by definition, you can't empathize. So an entire aspect of learning, one of the key drivers of learning we know that we've developed hundreds of thousand years to have, we will never be able to get from a machine. It just ignores that completely, which is why dropout rates for online courses are around like 85%. So that's a second thing, the empathy. That's why teachers, by the way, will always matter. We learn from each other. We do not learn from things. The third issue then, it's a concept called transfer. Basically, transfer says, how do we move knowledge and skills between different contexts, right? So like I'm a teacher, I teach my kids math. I'm glad you can do math in my classroom. I want you to be able to transfer it to home so you can do math when you're balancing your bills, maybe to work so you can balance a checkbook, whatever that is over there. We want you to be able to move your skills beyond school. So that's called transfer. Now, there are two things to know about transfer. First, all learning is highly contextual. If you study in a red room and then take a test in a green room, you will do worse than if you took a test in a red room. The context matters. So this means when kids learn online, they will be tying that learning to an incredibly narrow context, a screen. If the screen, believe it or not, it's not a varied context, it is locked down. So anytime kids learn online, you will see them unable to move that learning easily offline. You just showed me you could do it on a Kahoot. Why can't you do it in this quiz over here? Because I've got this context issue. Now, rightly, some listeners will point out, well, that knife is going to cut both ways. If I learn online and try and move it offline, I'm going to take a context hit. But if I learn offline and try and move it online, I'm going to take the same context hit. Touche, you absolutely will, until you recognize the second dimension of transfer, additive versus subtractive. So this basically says sometimes when you move a skill, you need to do more than what you initially learned to make that skill work in the new situation. We call that additive. Sometimes you have to do less than what you initially learned. Your learning was harder than the performance. We call that subtractive. So here's an example. Imagine you grew up driving a manual transmission car. Now someone pops you in an automatic. Well, shoot, automatic is much easier than a manual. I have to do less. It becomes the easiest thing in the world. Subtractive transfer is basically automatic. It's easy as heck. But flip it. If you learned how to drive on an automatic, and now I put you in a manual, a 4 on the floor, and I say drive, can you do it? Now it's additive transfer. You don't really know how to do it. You're basically back to scratch. You cannot do it. So subtractive transfer easy, additive transfer basically impossible.
But I've heard that you learn better, you'll retain and remember certain information better if you handwrite it versus if you type it versus if you just don't do anything at all.
Absolutely. So this goes a little bit, it goes beyond what we were just talking about. But what happens is usually we see this when it comes to, say, note taking, right? So you're in a class, you're taking notes. People who type typically type incredibly fast. So what they do is they end up taking verbatim notes. They become a stenographer. We call it shallow notes. They get every word. They have copious amounts of notes. But if you ask them, hey, what did you just learn today? They will flat out tell you, I don't know. I have to go read my notes. The only thing important to you is the sound and the order of the words. Did I hear it? Did I write it? Did I hear it? Did I write it? The meaning is irrelevant. Compare that to someone who takes notes with a pen and paper. So by definition, if you're taking notes by hand, you already have to be parsing out meaning. You have to be thinking what's important, what's not, what's worth getting down, what's irrelevant. But the effort is where the learning happens.
I'm an extremely fast typer, and I often tell people I just like to type the notes as we're doing meetings, etc., because I can type so much faster than I can write. But I definitely do not retain the information the same way. I always lean on it with this idea that, oh, I'll go back and search it, but it's not the same as when you're handwriting. And I remember even being in college or other classes where I'd write something down. I can physically remember where I wrote it on the notebook. It is completely ingrained in my mind.
Extend that. So you just tapped into something that I think is incredibly deep and important. Is one of the biggest aspects of human memory is exactly that. It's space. Hard copy books, handwritten documents, these things have unchanging three-dimensional locations. Like, think about this book here in front of me. Till this book burns into dust, the word in is going to be 10% of the way through, left page, top left-hand side. It ain't going nowhere. Now, I read that same thing on a screen, or I've typed my notes and now I've got them all on a computer. The word in will start on the bottom of the screen, scroll through the middle, go out the top. There is no three-dimensional location to it. So an entire aspect of human memory just gets wiped. So this is another reason why reading hard copy versus digital, you'll learn more. Write by hand on paper that stays still versus a screen where you can scroll and open and move, you will learn more because you have this spatial aspect.
Okay, so we've talked mostly about ed tech right now, just tech in general. I want to talk real quick about what you cover as the 3 apologies for ed tech. So for everyone listening, and I'll let you recap them, but the computers have so much potential. or tech, right? The potential, the ubiquitousness, and that the people, the end users, are using whatever the tech is incorrectly. So I thought that was fascinating. Can you just talk to those a little bit more and what the problems are with that?
Go with the first one, potential. When people will, that's the biggest argument everyone makes. Tech has potential to make so many inroads. Tech has potential. That's when you just got to remember, potential literally is what something is not. The issue is potential, what something could do, is never a solid enough basis upon which to make big, important decisions about education. You want to make a decision, don't tell me what it could do, tell me what it is doing. I can only deal with the data that exists now. Dylan William, he's one of the biggest guys in the field of educational research. He says, ed tech is the revolution that's been coming for 50 years. That's how long we've been told it's got potential. How much longer are we supposed to wait? So potential is never going to be a valid argument. Just say, cool, give me the data. Potential sounds neat. What is it actually doing? Which will then bring you into the idea that computers are ubiquitous. Tech is one of those ubiquitous things that kids are clearly spending 2,500 hours a year on. Do we really need an additional 6 hours at school to teach them anything? But let's pretend we do. Let's pretend somebody says it is ubiquitous. We do need to teach about this tech. That is going to bring us into the difference between curriculum and pedagogy. Curriculum is what we teach. Pedagogy is how we teach. So you can make an argument, we need to teach computers. I'm fine with that, believe it or not. That's a curriculum argument. The problem is most tech people will morph that through some linguistic alchemy into, we need to teach all things through a computer. Now it's pedagogy. Now you're telling me how to teach, and now you've crossed a line and it doesn't make sense anymore. So if anyone wants to use it's ubiquitous argument, say, cool, we can have a computer class. I'll have a computer lab, I'll teach coding. That doesn't mean I need to use a computer in writing class, that I need to use a computer in math class or history or gym. What we teach and how we teach are two different things, and how we teach needs to be dictated by the content I'm teaching, not the tool available to me. And last but not least, if you go to that, it's all your fault. You're using it wrong. Every inventor of every tool has a specific way how they think it should be used. Alfred Nobel invents dynamite. He says no one will ever use this in war. First thing it does is it's used in war. The intentions of a developer and the actual use or practice of the users are typically two very different things. And at the end of the day, the intentions are totally meaningless. I don't care what you wanted me to do with your tool. It's how are human beings actually using the tool that we need to ask. And we need to say, is that helping?
So if tech isn't the tool that, or maybe the savior of education that we were told it was going to be, how would you balance? What would that balance look like for you between analog and digital in your ideal classroom?
Just go back to a regular, well, I guess pre-new millennia school. There is a computer lab, the same as there's a wood shop lab, the same as there's a art lab. The idea being, if you want to use computers, it becomes a conscious decision. The teacher has to say, okay, I'm going to rent the computer lab during this time. I'm going to get my kids up. I'm going to walk them over. It becomes a very deliberate decision when we use them. The way it stands now with one-to-one computing devices and phones in the pockets and all this, it just becomes the default. Because it's there, let's use it. Because I don't have to do any actual deliberation, it's just that, yeah, pull it out, type away. The second you make people think about tech and actually make decisions in their life, I can do A or I can do B. It's not just an automatic, it has to be tech. That's when you start to see people using it very deliberately. We call it tech intentionality. So in my ideal world, you'd still teach about tech. You would have a tech lab, which makes everything tech intentional, but you would by no means have freely accessible tech that kids can touch when they want to, how they want to, and it's in every classroom, because that's just totally irrelevant.
So then if you could have one message go to policymakers and the people in charge and to parents to fight for this, to do something to improve the situation for our students, what would that be?
Step one would be most states or districts have banned cell phones. I think it's a great move. That's just step one. The next inevitable step is you have to legalize opt-in, opt-out. The first thing you got to do is allow opt-out. And what you see in a couple of districts, or excuse me, schools were doing this in Australia. When you allow parents to opt out, that requires every teacher, everyone to have both analog and digital versions of anything. The more teachers have to do both analog and digital, the more they realize really quickly that the analog stuff requires them to do more work, but it's always better than the digital stuff. they can guide it better, they can tweak it better, they can make better sense of what kids are doing with it. And within about a year, the majority of teachers will only be doing analog, because when you force them to do both, they will start to compare it themselves, and they'll say, look, if I'm going to put all this work into this and I know this is working better, I'm going to make all my kids do this. So believe it or not, if you just do that opt-in thing, that's going to force people to have to do so much stuff that I think you're going to make a big analog push without much more beyond that. It's not going to solve every problem, but I think that's a really, really powerful first step.
Do you have time for one more question? I want to
Of
ask you-
course, absolutely.
Okay. This is an argument that I feel like I hear everywhere when it's related both to tech, but especially AI. This idea of all of a sudden teachers are going to be able to do so much more because those basic things are removed. But I don't feel like that is going to be the case. How do we fight against that? What argument, what response can our parents have to fight back against this convenience factor that is being pushed? Because to me, I just think it's a sad loss of humanity and connection, and even those memories of going through that learning process, both for the teacher and the student, and that relationship built. I mean, there's just, I'm just extremely nostalgic on all of this. It makes me so sad. But
You're nostalgic for the right stuff. Is if you were nostalgic, but all the data said that our schooling sucked, then I'd say you're just being nostalgic. But you're being nostalgic, and all the data says we were doing much, much better. So maybe it's not nostalgia so much as it is recognition that we've made some wrong decisions here. And we got two choices: either continue to dig this hole, sunken cost, or go back. And in this case, I don't consider going back to be a reversion. I consider it to be a fix for the mistakes that we've been making in between. One of the biggest things we've discovered in education research, I would argue, in the last 50 years, and it is so painfully obvious that I can't believe we didn't see it much sooner, is what is the benefit of things like feedback? What is the benefit of things like testing, of giving pop quizzes? What is the benefit of asking kids questions? For the longest time, we assumed the benefit was to the student. When I give you feedback, you've learned something about yourself. When you take a test, you've learned something about what you know. And to be fair, that's absolutely, it does help them. But by far, the biggest impact of all that stuff is on the teacher. When the teacher gives a kid feedback, it changes the way the teacher teaches that kid. When the teacher asks a question, depending on how the kids respond, they change their teaching tactics. We are highly responsive individuals, which is always my favorite joke, because everyone says tech is so good because it's adaptive. You know who else is adaptive? Humans. We are wickedly adaptive, and we are far better adaptive because it's not just answers. We can read body language. We can read size. We can read the sound of somebody's voice, the tone of the inflection of their question. Teachers are so wickedly adept at adjusting their teaching to meet where students are at. That's the biggest impact of all these things. And that's where empathy comes from. You can only really start to find these moves when kids and teachers empathize together. You cannot get it from a bunch of ones and zeros on a screen.
that is really encouraging, because I think that while this has been a painful journey, people are seeing how tech in general is not as wonderful as we thought it was going to be in this technology saturated world. All right. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share? Anything that we didn't get to cover?
I just say keep it up. The first domino was cell phones, and 10 years ago, people said there's no way you're getting that out of people's hands. We did it. So the next step is going to be ed tech. It's going to be laptops, one-to-one computers. The journey is just beginning, but we've proven that we can make a difference. So just keep it up.
I love learning, so this is just always one of my most favorite things to do, be able to talk to people like you. But if people can't talk to you, where can they find you to learn all of the cool stuff that you have to share?
Oh, so we have a website called lmeglobal.net. So that's Learning Made Easy, LME Global. I have a YouTube channel, Jared Cooney Horvath, I think is just the name of the YouTube channel, where I put out learning videos. That's where we take a look at new research and say, paper just came out a couple weeks ago. What does it mean? What does it mean for us as parents, as teachers, as students? And like I said, I got a new book coming out called The Digital Delusion. I think it'll be out in December, but I don't know. But that's the book which gets all the data and mechanisms together to say, here's what we need to push back against schools. It's like the playbook we need as parents to say, enough with this ed tech stuff. Here's why we're pushing back and what we can do.
This has been an absolutely delightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wish that this information was taught in schools. Kids are always asking why, so it's kind of surprising that we don't tell them. And while I'm not saying that every student will feel this way, I do think many would benefit from knowing why they need this analog world, why they need to handwrite notes instead of just typing or not listening, why multitasking does not help them learn. The biggest takeaway here, quite frankly, is simple. Technology isn't always the answer. Now, I'm pretty sure you know this, but the fact is that sometimes the best learning happens with paper, pencils, or pens, and a caring teacher who knows your child's name. If you're wondering how to advocate for better learning in your school, start by asking questions, demand the evidence, and when you're told that tech will solve all problems, remember that relationships always matter more than screens. And don't forget, change is possible. 10 years ago, no one thought we could get cell phones out of schools, but here we have done that. Well, in many states, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen even more. The next step now is making sure our kids have the option to learn in analog ways too, going completely digital free if that is what we as parents want for them. So keep pushing, keep asking, and keep fighting for what's best for our kids. If you want to learn more about Dr. Horvath and his work, you can check it out at his website, lmeglobal.net, and of course his YouTube channel, which will be linked in the show notes. And don't forget, keep an eye out for his upcoming book, The Digital Delusion. And as always, please like and subscribe to hear more from us when new content's released. Share this episode with your friends, your school board, and frankly, anyone who wants to see our kids thrive, which hopefully is everybody. Thanks for joining us at M4L Academy. As James Madison said, the advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty, which of course is the mission of M4L Academy. And so, until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep fighting for what's best for our kids. Class dismissed.